segment. Kentucky head coach Mark Stoops after getting blown out by Georgia. Fans have the right to complain. I just encourage them to donate more because that's what those dudes are doing. I can promise you, Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. You're allowed to do that these days. We could use some help. What's the difference in what he said and what Nick Saban said about a year ago with Alabama and A&M?
Nothing at all. And look, he's going to have to keep doing that. Like, you're going to have to keep soliciting money for your fans for NIL because that's where the money's going to come from. But I will ask this. Eventually, that money's going to come out of the head coach's pocket. To me, it seemingly has to. Because if you got head coaches making $10 million a year when if they made $8 and $2 million of that could go into an NIL fund, I think that's going to happen because eventually you can only go to your donor so much. So I just wonder, like, it'd be hard for me as an average fan to donate to an NIL collective, even if I was giving $5,000 a year, what I could afford to give to this NIL collective, because that's the thing I want to donate to at my school. If I was doing that, and I'm looking at a guy who's like, well, this guy's making $8 million. If he sacrificed some of his money into the budget for the players, like, I don't think I'd hate that. So I do think that there's going to be a reckoning with that. I think that's part of the reason that there are coaches that hate NIL. They won't say it because they know eventually, school's going to go to him and say, look, go to the school and say, look, I need more NIL. Like, yeah, but we're kind of tapped out. And then, well, what if you gave some money to NIL? Well, no. I don't want to give any money to it. Like, we're not talking about me here. We're talking about you. And that's where I think the rubber's going to hit the road a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, do the coaches' contracts keep going up and the NIL keeps ramping up, or do those kind of like hit a plateau and then that money now gets redirected? Yeah, I don't know. Or do both go up in the case of a couple of conferences, and then everybody else is left scrambling, figuring out how to do even one, much less both, in this current landscape? That's going to be the, or at least a part of the many questions in the future of college athletics and college football in particular. I felt like this was much ado about nothing, really. I mean, I understand why it became a story, but I don't understand the sort of, I guess, any semblance, and I don't know how much there really was. I didn't dig far into like dimensions or anything, but I don't know how much backlash she got. I did see a little bit of pushback to it, but this reminds me of, I said this a few months ago, of how bizarre it is that there are certain segments of, I guess, college athletics fans who don't like you to bring up NIL as a reason for their success. And it's like, well, why not? It's the same. It's like you don't, like, NFL teams don't go like, don't talk about how we signed that big free agent. Don't mention that. Like, it makes us look bad. Like, it doesn't do anything. It's part of the rules. You can legally do it. It's not a big deal. So if you paid $100,000 for a wide receiver from California, you paid $100,000. Like, the veil and the secrecy and all that still exists, I guess that's just like remnants of the way it's always been, and we're still like realizing like you can talk openly about that, but the whole perception by some that's like it's like a knock on your team if you mention NIL, I think is kind of weird, right?
Well, it's
very
interesting
weird.
If someone mentions that's how you brought in some players. But at the same time, the fans who might get a little bit defensive about that are also the ones who are, God, we're doing great with NIL.
Right, yeah. It's not a knock.
It's not.
It's just saying, like, you did more in NIL than other teams did, and you got better players as a result, and you're a better team as a result because you spent more to get better players, and the other teams didn't. And so I don't know if that's part of this is, like, don't credit our success to – or I don't know if it's other fan bases, like a Georgia fan, going like, we're not just good just because of NIL. Like, I don't know if that's the reaction or what, but like, even if that's the case, why does that bother you?
Yeah,
you're good, period. It doesn't matter. It's all legal.
You know what? It also reminds me, like, one time I was in my mid-20s and I was telling a guy, like a friend of a friend, I was like, hey, we were hanging out. I was like, hey, I got to run. I'll catch you with you days later. I got to get my oil changed. And the guy goes, Psh, you pay to get your oil changed? What are you, less of a man? And I'm like, I mean, they're going to do it better than I can. It costs $19 at this place down the street. Yeah. So I'm good. It's going to take 30 minutes. Like, I'm great. Like, I sit there and I'll eat a candy bar and drink a Gatorade and I'll be happy. I'm not at all, trying to do that. It's, I don't do that. I'm like, well, change your oil in your own driveway all you want.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I'm gonna live my life not covered in grease. So
that sounds like a person with big insecurities in every other area of life. So they've got to dunk on you about how they self-oil change or something. But yeah, I
but
don't
like
know.
it's the same thing. Like, like, oh well, like we change
We
our
do
own
it the
oil
right
at this
way,
school.
yeah.
Like, okay, well, when you go and you have to fix your car for a real problem. Tell me how that works out.
But I think what Mark Stoops said is, how are you going to beat Georgia? By getting better players.
Yeah.
And how are you going to get better players? By NIL fundraising. And so I think he was just stating the obvious, really.
All right, when we come